Welcome all to our Route 66 BRT study update. My name is Paulina Baeza, and I am a senior planner at the Tulsa Planning Office. We're going to present a general overview of the process that we followed to complete the preliminary design phase of this project. As background, in 2020, the Tulsa Planning Office was assigned by the City of Tulsa Mayor's Office with the task of conducting a study that would determine the future of the Route 66 bus rapid transit line, which is Tulsa's second BRT service. The intention of the project is to serve the community by offering a frequent bus service that is reliable, accessible, convenient, and safe, while highlighting some of Tulsa's local assets. So our agenda will cover each of the steps that were followed in the process. The first block is a presentation that will be delivered by the Tulsa Planning Office, which includes the 5 phases of the study, from team assembly, defining the route, identifying stop locations, branding, marketing, and outreach overview, and the development of a land use framework, and finally, next steps. The second block will cover a detailed marketing and branding strategy that will be delivered by HNTD Consulting. So as you can see, several people were involved in the development of this study. We had a management team that included leadership from the Tulsa Planning Office, INCOG, and the City of Tulsa's Mayor's Office. We also included a project team that included staff from INCOG, the Planning Office as well, and Tulsa Transit, and a consultant team that provided support throughout this process. And we'll continue working as well on the design and implementation phase of the project. So when we were assigned this project, our goals were to identify the alignment for the Route 66 bus rapid transit route, to identify stop locations along the selected alignment, to develop a strategy for marketing and branding of the route, and to develop a land use framework to encourage transit-oriented development along it. Also, 2 guiding principles were established, which were to ensure social equity by focusing resources to marginalized populations, and to promote existing assets and economic development of the BRT corridor. In terms of alignments, we were asked to analyze both 11th and 21st Street from east to west, considering 2 fixed segments. On the west side, along 11th Street, or Route 66, from Harbor to downtown, to include the IDL, the University of Tulsa, and the Meadow Gold districts as part of the route. And on the east side, on 21st Street, from 145th East Avenue to Garnett Road, to include the Tulsa Global District Main Street and the Eastgate Metroplex Employment Center. 5 segments were also analyzed from north to south, including Garnett Road, Memorial Drive, Sheridan Road, Yale Avenue, and Harvard Avenue. Now, based on the request, we decided to utilize strategic planning, which is a data-oriented process that is used to allocate programs and funding where it's most beneficial, and public outreach as well to develop our study. We also divided it into 5 phases, the 5 phases I mentioned previously, including team assembly, defining the route, stop location identification, branding, marketing, and outreach, and finally, a land use framework. Each phase had 2 sets of meetings, one for staff work group and one for the steering committee, except for the last 2 phases, 4 and 5, which were combined in a set of meetings. Now, using strategic planning, we translated the 2 guiding principles into indicator categories. Our social equity principle derived into 2 indicators, demographics and equity, and education and youth, while our economic development and asset principle was represented by employment and tourism. Now for phase 1, team assembly, we created 2 main teams, a staff work group, which was composed of staff from Tulsa Transit, City of Tulsa, INCOG, the Planning Office, and HNTD Consultants, and a steering committee. The staff work group was in charge of overseeing the logistics, preparation of materials, and the general process of the study, while the committee provided feedback throughout each of the phases. Now, the steering committee members were selected based on their expertise, presence, and involvement in projects that are being developed along the route, in order to represent each of the 4 indicator categories under the guiding principles. So for example, education and youth included stakeholders from organizations and institutions like Impact Tulsa, the Tulsa Public Schools, the YMCA, and the University of Tulsa. Employment, as another example, included representatives from HIPROS, the Tulsa Regional Chamber, Workforce Tulsa, and the Eastgate Metroplex Leasing. In addition to this, we also included elected officials, Tulsa County Commissioner Karen Keith, and the councilors from all the districts that are covered by the route, which were 3, 4, 5, and District 6. For phase 2, define the route, the staff work group collected and reviewed data points under each of the 4 indicator categories. For example, demographics and equity included data points related to minority presence, zero vehicle household, unemployment rate, and diversity. Education and youth focused on youth destinations and presence of schools and economically disadvantaged students. Employment focused on specific job concentration, employment centers, and specific pay ranges as well. And tourism considered Route 66 landmarks, retail, dining, lodging, and other tourism-related destinations. Now, the steering committee was presented with this data, and they provided feedback on the indicators and assigned weights via a survey, email, and through conversations in breakout rooms using Zoom, as our outreach had to be carried online due to the pandemic. They also provided other information and recommendations that would be utilized as part of the study. Now, besides the guiding principle indicators, we also determined that there was a need to consider feasibility indicators, including cost, existing transit service, built environment, and connectivity. In a similar fashion to the guiding principle indicators, this data was analyzed internally with the staff work group. So what we did was we reviewed the data points, we collected them, and we also assigned weights. For feasibility, a cost analysis was done by HNT consultants, including BRT operation cost and fiber installation. For existing transit, ridership surveys were launched, and ridership data was collected by Tulsa Transit. Regarding built environment, we looked at existing need-based destinations, for example, grocery stores, healthcare, government facilities, social services, and nonprofits. And for connectivity, we looked at access to multimodal transportation networks, such as bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So as mentioned, this data was collected, reviewed, and weighted internally. So we conducted our own ridership data, we did our surveys, and the consultant team assisted in developing an operational and cost analysis. Now, the analysis portion led to identifying top alignments in 2 different levels, our guiding principle analysis and our feasibility analysis, which had weights assigned previously by our teams. Each of them would weigh 50%, and the analysis of these levels led to a BRT score of 100%. And the identification further of 3 top alignments, with Garnett rising to the top. Now, Garnett ended up being a recommended choice for various reasons. It is the most cost-effective option. It's high in diversity, as in Hispanic Latinx communities, also high rate of disabilities, high rate of unemployment, a balance of incomes, low, moderate, and high. It's where we have the highest concentration of hotels and Route 66 landmarks in terms of the options that we had. It has redevelopment potential, high access to social services, and existing transit ridership. As for destinations, it would cover Denver Avenue Station, the Meadow Gold District, the Mother Road Market, and the University of Tulsa on the fixed 11th Street West Side segment. The Eastgate Metroplex Employment Center and NAMHI at the Tulsa Global District on 21st Street would be covered on the east side. And along the analyzed portion, destinations such as Route 66 landmarks, parks like Braden or McClure, and access to the Mingo Trail, schools, and other need-based destinations, including employment and grocery stores, would also be covered. So with that, I will turn it over to Ty Simmons, who will discuss phase 3 of the process.
Thanks, Paulina. So I'm going to briefly recap how we identified stops along the route, as well as how we prioritize them in the event of funding constraint. During our second steering committee meeting, which was held last November, We divided each member into one of 6 teams and placed them in breakout rooms where they were tasked with locating up to 10 stops along a roughly 2-mile stretch of the route. This map shows the results of that exercise. Since each team section overlapped with other team sections, we had to reconcile those and identify the best location based on feedback from Tulsa Transit and our consultants, H&TB. We then set out to prioritize the stops into 3 priority categories in the event of any funding constraints. Priority 1 stops included the 2 termini, which are Denver Avenue Station and Eastgate Metroplex, and 11th and Peoria intersection, where the Route 66 BRT intersects the Peoria Arrow BRT. Priority 1 stops also included transfer points to other Tulsa Transit routes, as well as arterial intersections, including Utica Avenue. Stops located between arterial streets were generally ranked as priority 2, and 3 stop locations were ranked as priority 3, based on adjacent land uses and ridership potential. So you may have noticed that these maps have not shown anything for downtown. We decided to involve the Downtown Tulsa Partnership to help identify the alignment and stop locations for downtown. We met with the Downtown Tulsa Partnership along with Tulsa Transit and identified 3 potential alignment options for downtown and performed our strategic planning analysis for each using a 3-block radius. This slide shows the 3 alignment options. Option A, which we call Boulder Cincinnati, starts at Denver Avenue Station, travels north on Denver to 2nd Street and on to Cincinnati, taking advantage of the existing Peoria Arrow BRT stop at 2nd and Main next to the Hyatt Hotel. Once on Cincinnati, it travels south to 11th Street and then proceeds eastward toward Eastgate Metroplex. On the inbound trip from Eastgate Metroplex to Denver Avenue Station, the route travels on 11th Street to Boulder Avenue, then to 6th Street, and then on to Denver. This alignment performed best in our strategic planning analysis when considering downtown employment and education and youth activities. Option B, which we call Denver Avenue, makes use of Denver Avenue for the inbound and outbound trips. Beginning at Denver Avenue Station, the route travels to 3rd Street, then to Cheyenne, then south along Cheyenne to 6th, and then on to Denver. Once on Denver, it travels south to 11th Street and then eastward towards Eastgate Metroplex. On the inbound trip, the route travels on 11th Street to Denver Avenue, then north on Denver to Denver Avenue Station. This option ranked best for connectivity based on our strategic planning analysis. Option C, which we call the Elgin 7th and 2nd, uses Denver Avenue, 2nd Street, and Elgin Avenue, as well as 7th Street. Beginning at Denver Avenue Station, the route travels north on Denver to 2nd Street, then along 2nd Street to Elgin Avenue, taking advantage of the existing Peoria Arrow BRT stop at 2nd and Main next to the Hyatt. Once on Elgin, the route travels south to 11th Street, then eastward onto Eastgate Metroplex. On the inbound trip, the route travels on 11th Street to Elgin, then to 7th Street, then west on 7th to Denver, and then north on Denver to Denver Avenue Station. This option ranked best for housing, tourism, and the built environment based on our strategic planning analysis. In addition to the analysis we performed on each alignment, we also created a survey to garner public opinion on the 3 alignment options. Both the Downtown Tulsa Partnership and Tulsa Transit promoted the survey through various online platforms, as well as sharing it with their stakeholders. We also held a public Zoom meeting in February where participants were asked to fill out the survey and participate in an exercise to identify potential stops for each of the 3 alignment options. The survey itself was very short, only asking 3 questions. The first question asked people to rank 3 different alignment options. Question 2 asked about the respondents' frequency of transit ridership, and question 3 asked about the respondents' connection to downtown, whether they were a property owner, business owner, resident, employee, and/or visitor. Respondents were asked to check all that apply. Results for question 2 and 3 show that about 3/4 of the respondents use transit, with nearly 40% using it at least once a week. Over half of the respondents make visits to downtown on occasions, just over 40% work downtown, and just shy of 30% live downtown. In terms of how people rank the alignments, option C, the Elgin 7th 2nd Street alignment, was tops. Overall, half the respondents ranked it as number 1. Option A, the Boulder Cincinnati alignment, ranked 2nd, and option B, the Denver Avenue alignment, ranked 3rd. And this correlated exactly with our strategic planning analysis. Based on the strategic planning analysis and input from our steering committee, Tulsa Transit, or the Downtown Tulsa Partnership, HNTB, stakeholders, and the public, we arrived at a final alignment for the Route 66 BRT. This map shows the final alignment, as well as all the stop locations that were identified along the route. We worked with Tulsa Transit and HNTB to rank each of the stop locations from 1 to 22 in the event that any funding constraints arise. This map shows the final alignment for Route 66 BRT with stops and how it would integrate with the Peoria Arrow BRT. These two lines would essentially form the backbone to the transit network in Tulsa. Now, John will briefly touch on branding, marketing, and outreach.
Hi, my name is John Tankard, and I'm a senior planner with the Tulsa Planning Office. I'm going to cover Phase 4 and Phase 5 of the planning process, and then I'll describe our next steps. Phase 4 of this process has been led by our consultant team from HNTB. Later in this presentation, they will go into great detail on branding with opportunities to participate and provide feedback about which branding elements and style are your favorites. At a high level, elements of the branding for this project draw from the existing elements along Route 66, as well as incorporating the design style of the Arrow Bus Rapid Transit system that can be seen on Peoria Avenue today. As we move into implementation in 2022, we are establishing 4 subcommittees to be led by Tulsa Transit and HNTB. These subcommittees will each have unique responsibilities. The first is the Public Outreach and Advocacy Subcommittee. They will develop and conduct outreach and engagement strategies to promote the Route 66 Bus Rapid Transit service and field input and feedback from the broader public. Next is the Marketing and Branding Subcommittee. They will take the feedback we receive on branding elements and apply those to the BRT stations and buses. They will also manage and direct marketing efforts to secure buy-in from property owners along the alignment, as well as broader marketing efforts to promote the new service locally and across the region. The third subcommittee will focus on design and operations, focusing on the technical design of BRT stations and how they are seamlessly integrated into existing streetscapes. Finally, the fourth subcommittee will oversee the work of the other 3 subcommittees. This leadership and implementation subcommittee will be made up of elected representatives and high-ranking City of Tulsa and Tulsa Transit officials. Phase 5 of the BRT planning process was the development of a land use framework for the selected alignment. In order for public transit to be successful, it's important that land use decisions in proximity to the alignment are transit-oriented. That is, that they promote walkability and allow for higher numbers of individuals to live in proximity in order to easily use public transit for daily trips. In order to facilitate transit-oriented development along BRT alignments in Tulsa, our approach is to use a mixed-use rezoning program. In 2017, a land use framework was completed for the Peoria Avenue Bus Rapid Transit system, which led to a City Council-initiated mixed-use rezoning program where the fees typically associated with rezoning are waived. As of this year, we've had more than 30 completed rezoning applications along Peoria Avenue, and we are proposing that this same program be applied along the Route 66 BRT corridor as well. So what is mixed-use development? The Municipal Research and Service Center defines it as pedestrian-friendly development that blends 2 or more residential, commercial, cultural, institutional, and/or industrial uses. And this mixing of uses can manifest in 2 orientation types. First, vertical mixed use combines these uses within the same building, often with more public uses, such as shops and restaurants, on the ground floor, with more private uses, like residential or office, on the upper floors. A great example of this along Route 66 today is the Campbell Hotel, which has shops with on-street parking on the ground floor and hotel rooms upstairs. The other orientation is horizontal mixed use, which co-locates a mix of land uses within the same parcel of land. These uses should be complementary, and the site should have a high level of walkability. An example of this condition along Route 66 today is the Mother Road Market site, which continues to develop out new uses under common ownership in a walkable area. In Tulsa, our zoning code contains regulations for mixed-use development. The approach in our zoning code includes 2 major components. First is the zoning district, which regulates the permitted uses in a specific area. And second is character designation, which regulates the form and layout of a development. I'm going to review the different options in each of these 2 categories. First, there are 4 mixed-use zoning districts, MX1, MX2, MX3, and IMX, all of which permit a different set of land uses. MX1 or neighborhood mixed use allows small-scale retail, dining, and service uses that primarily serve surrounding neighborhoods. Uses like vehicle sales and services are not permitted in this zoning district. MX2 or community mixed use allows for more use types in addition to the uses permitted in MX1, including employment uses, as well as fueling stations and vehicle part and supply sales. MX3 or regional mixed use allows for the highest intensity of development and permits uses like large-scale retail, entertainment, civic, and employment centers. These uses serve a regional area as opposed to a more localized service area. Low-impact manufacturing, which includes breweries, is allowed in this zoning district by special exception and approval from the city's Board of Adjustment. Finally, IMX or institutional mixed use is meant for large-scale institutional uses such as universities and hospitals. There are also 4 character designations, each of which has different implications for the form and layout of a development project. First is the pedestrian or P designation. This designation includes a high level of pedestrian focus, requiring buildings to be built up to the sidewalk, and parking is prohibited between the building and the primary street. This means parking is either located on the side of or behind the structure. The urban or U designation has many of the same characteristics of the P designation, but allows for a greater variety of permitted building types. The variable or V designation is intended for areas that are more automobile oriented and allows for greater flexibility with the positioning of a building on a lot and allows for parking between the building and the sidewalk. Finally, the flexible or F designation shares many of the characteristics of the variable designation, but allows the greatest variety of building types of any of the character designations. This table shows which building types are allowed in each of the 4 character designations. As the intention of this program is to promote mixed-use development, the flexible character designation is likely to be the least useful, as it permits duplexes and detached houses, but all of these designations may be appropriate in a given context. Through collaboration with the Route 66 Commission, the Tulsa Global District Board of Directors, Tulsa Transit, and with a great deal of public input, we developed a set of recommendations for which mixed-use zoning districts and character designations are appropriate in different locations along the proposed BRT alignment. When this process was done for the Peoria BRT alignment, the approach was to identify key intersections that were well-suited for mixed-use development. These were areas that are already commercial, retail, or employment in nature. The Route 66 BRT alignment is different than Peoria because the entire stretch of 11th Street and much of Garnett and 21st Street are commercial, retail, or employment uses. So instead of identifying key intersections to promote rezoning to mixed use, we decided to open up this program to all property owners along the alignment, except for a couple of gaps on Garnett and 21st Street, where residential subdivisions come all the way to the main street. This way, positive changes can be made along the entire corridor, creating a more cohesive environment of transit-oriented development. In general, both the recommended zoning districts and character designations step down from pedestrian-focused urban character near downtown to more auto-centric suburban character at the eastern terminus. I'd like to note the prevalence of MX1 along 11th Street, where there is concerted effort by the Route 66 Commission to prevent an increase in the number of auto sales, which is permitted in MX2 and MX3. This makes sense with our goal of transit-oriented development, though there will always be a place for the automobile, given the relevance to Route 66 history. With the character designations, we wanted to create some options for potential rezoning applicants. So instead of a single character designation being recommended, each color on this map represents 2 possible designations. However, the pattern of stepping down from urban to suburban is still visible. So how does this work? This program is voluntary in nature, and we'll begin promoting it through our network of stakeholders that we've connected with through this planning process. We want to connect with property and business owners along the alignment to discuss the finer details of the program, what zoning recommendations are feasible for redevelopment, and the catalog of incentives that will be available to complement this mixed-use rezoning program. We've partnered with the Tulsa Authority for Economic Opportunity, as well as TEDC, Creative Capital, to provide commercial revitalization incentive funds available for all commercial properties along the alignment. However, those property owners that rezone to mixed use will be eligible for higher loan amounts with more favorable loan terms. Other incentives that can help spur redevelopment along the route include a brownfields remediation program, the Route 66 Commission's Neon Sign Grant Program, and an upcoming facade improvement grant program also established by the Route 66 Commission. Okay, moving on. We've arrived at what comes next for the overall Route 66 bus rapid transit project. This presentation is a part of the public outreach to promote the completion of the planning phase for the BRT and is complemented by virtual sessions and in-person engagement at the Denver Avenue station. We're happy to announce the release of our report that can be found at tulsaplanning.org/BRT66. Please take some time to review the report and leave us feedback. From here, we will move into implementation with the 4 subcommittees I mentioned before, which will be led by Tulsa Transit and our consultant team from HNTB. These committees will begin their work in 2022 and will include more personalized engagement with property and business owners to finalize details of design, mixed-use rezoning, redevelopment incentives, and more. With that, I will now turn it over to our consultant team from HNTB to continue the presentation with an activity related to the potential branding of the Route 66 BRT system. Thank you.
My name is Brian Comer. I serve as the consultant project manager for the Route 66 BRT project, the preliminary design phase, and we will be providing an overview of the branding, marketing, and outreach. The integration of the Aero BRT brand into the Route 66 BRT line is an important component of the preliminary design process. Bus rapid transit systems throughout the country use branding to establish an identifiable, marketable, and common theme that clearly differentiates the BRT as a premium transit service. The Tulsa BRT brand, the Aero, was created during the preliminary design phase for the Peoria BRT line back in 2018 and was developed with both Peoria and Route 66 corridors in mind. The Aero brand elements, including the name and logo, are intended to reflect Tulsa's transportation and architectural history with a nod to the aerospace industry, Art Deco heritage, and architectural influences. It is also a direct reflection of the fast and frequent BRT service. Furthermore, the Art Deco aesthetic relates very well to the Route 66 BRT corridor. The brand elements, including the name and logo, are incorporated into the BRT vehicles, the stations, including the platform, shelter, bike racks, vertical marker, and logo. There is an opportunity to reflect Route 66 unique elements into the stations to build on the brand and apply it to the Route 66 corridor. Note, the BRT vehicles for each line will be consistent between the 2 lines, with the head sign indicating the individual route. The historic Route 66 corridor has numerous architectural elements, such as the iconic meadow gold sign, that could influence the design of the new BRT stations, including Art Deco architecture, transportation elements, and the historic and iconic Route 66 highway shield. The Aero logo will remain consistent on the Peoria and Route 66 lines. However, the Route 66 stations and markers could incorporate sub-branding elements to highlight this as a unique BRT line. This could include a secondary logo. Options for such a logo are shown on the slide, and they could blend the Route 66 name and iconography. The Aero color scheme will be used to identify this as a Tulsa BRT route. However, there are opportunities to incorporate complementary secondary colors that reflect the Route 66 corridor. This could include the use of colors associated with the Route 66 signs and highway shield, and as well as architecture, including but not limited to reds, gold, gray, or black. This could also potentially include neon options. These colors could be incorporated as secondary elements on the marker fins as shown on the slide. This could include both color on the fin as well as lighting elements. Similarly, the secondary Route 66 logos could be placed on the side of the marker, visible to potential riders. This would help clearly differentiate this as a unique route and reinforce the Route 66 corridor brand. Other branding options include the use of vinyl wraps on the markers and shelters that are specific and unique to the Route 66 corridor. This approach could be station specific to highlight key destinations, such as the University of Tulsa or special districts and neighborhoods. An example of this approach is the existing Peoria BRT gathering place station at 31st and Peoria. Vinyl wraps on the markers could also be consistent throughout the Route 66 corridor and could incorporate a key architectural element as shown on these examples. As the project transitioned to final design in 2022, 4 subcommittees will be established to advance the technical work. These subcommittees will address public outreach and advocacy, marketing and branding, design and operations, and leadership and implementation. These subcommittees will help guide and assist the public and stakeholder outreach, the branding elements and marketing. They will also serve as a sounding board for station and infrastructure design and will help guide the process moving forward. The preliminary branding concepts identified during the preliminary design process and illustrated in the slideshow will be refined and explored in more detail during the final design process in 2022. Please use the link below or use your phone to access the QR code, your camera phone, to access the survey and provide your feedback on the preliminary design elements. Thank you.